Hi, folks. Welcome back to another edition of Rich Conversations, a series of really insightful but short and snappy one-to-ones between me, Rich, and somebody in my network who I see has been an absolute expert in their field. And I'm thrilled to be joined by Dionne Walton from Teenage Cancer Trust. Hi, Dionne.
Hello, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Thanks so much for joining me. A great topic today, I think, and certainly colleagues who might be watching this through platforms like LinkedIn can certainly engage on this one. It's the topic of career progression for school leavers. Fascinating area. Let's start off with a great question for you, Dionne. I think when you were at school, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, this is not an easy question because it went, as anybody who knows me will not be surprised to know that it went through peaks and troughs. But the earliest career I can remember kind of thinking, yeah, that's definitely what I wanted to do was when I was at primary school. I studied Egyptology and I was getting to know all of this stuff around the Egyptians. And I can remember really clearly saying to my dad, I want to be an archaeologist. And his response to me was, Dionne, do you know you're going to have to sleep on the floor and you're going to have to camp and it's going to be dirty and you're not going to have showers? And so I was put off that idea quite quickly. And then I also remember saying to him, he was a chef at one stage in my young life. And I said to him, I could go there. I remember watching Junior MasterChef. And I said to him, I could do this. I'm quite good in the kitchen. I could do this. And he was like, oh, you'll get shouted at. You'll just cry. And then I started to see more on TV around celebrity chefs. And I was like, no, he's right. I don't have the thick skin for that. And then when it came to doing work experience, I went to a hairdresser's and I was taking out curlers and sweeping the floor, making hot cups of coffee and tea for old ladies that were coming in for their blue rinse. And I was shattered. And I just turned around and said, no, I don't want to do this. I definitely don't want to do this. So the fact that I've been a teacher in my career and I've now spent 7 years in young people's charities is quite far away from any of those three when I was younger. So yeah, that's what I wanted to be when I grew up.
It's a crazy question, really, isn't it, that we put onto young people of what do you want to be when you grow up? And I've fallen into the trap myself a million times. If you're trying to start a conversation with anybody of a particular age, it's often that go-to question.
Yeah.
And really, we're kind of putting a lot of ridiculous pressure, but it's a stupid question to ask because, like you, I mean, I still don't even know what I want to be when I grow up. And
Absolutely.
I think I've grown up. So
I think that's the thing. When you speak to a lot of colleagues and a lot of other professionals, I think if you pose that question to them, I think a lot of people would say, actually, I'm still working that out. So the fact that we say that to such young children and then teenagers and young adults when they are looking at what options they're going to take for GCSE or what they're going to do for their A-levels and beyond, or whether it is looking for a different form of education or a different way to get into a career path, actually it's quite a detrimental question rather than actually an inspiring question for young people, I think.
Yeah, sure. And people watching this, colleagues who may have an involvement in careers within their place of work, what can we all do, do you think, to try and make our place of work, our careers more attractive to those who might be thinking of options for their GCSEs? What is it we can all do, do you think?
I think there's a few different things that we can do, actually. I think, first of all, in terms of LinkedIn is a really good example because I didn't use LinkedIn until I came into this sector. So I got a bit of a name for myself using LinkedIn in one of my first roles, actually, because I used to use it a lot to connect with people. And I think if you think about young people and their aspirations, they're entirely limited to what they have an experience of or what they see and hear about. So I think actually using LinkedIn to talk about your career path and your career journey and the ups and downs is really, really healthy and really important, because I think certainly my experience has been with the young people that I've worked with over the years, most young people think that when they see somebody really successful or they see somebody who's really enjoying their work, they assume that it's been a really straightforward path from A to B. They just knew what they wanted to do. They went out and they got that job and it's been really plain sailing. Whereas most of us know that that's not necessarily the experience. So I think normalizing that conversation about the ups and downs that you've had and the right and wrong turns that you've had to make, I think that's a really powerful way to actually normalize the fact that you are going to take wrong turns and you are going to end up in companies that you don't necessarily want to be in, and you might have to stop and take a career break and reassess. I think that's a really healthy thing that we can all do. But I also think that we've got more than ever a responsibility to offer opportunities to young people to come and experience and see what roles are out there. Like I said, we're limited to what we see and hear, and some young people, even more so, are limited by those people around them and the jobs that they see. But they could have a real talent that we're looking for, but they just don't necessarily have somebody there driving the ambition or helping them to get into opportunities. One experience I've had quite recently is my daughter is 15, and so she's now looking at work experience, and she came home and talked to me about the conversation that they were having in one of their classes about work experience. And she felt quite bad because we talked about women in STEM, and we talked about Formula One and whether she could get work experience there, or journalism, like all of these really amazing roles that she would love to be involved in. But it's just because I have said to her, look, we'll shoot for the stars and see where we end up. But she was saying that actually she felt really embarrassed to talk about that with her friends and her peers because they weren't aiming that high, because they didn't necessarily have people having that conversation with her. So I think if we can offer work experience, shadowing, talking to groups of young people about the roles that are available, I think that's really going to help with the whole equity and making sure that everybody has the opportunity to explore their potential, and we get the best out of these young people coming into the workforce.
Yeah, fabulous advice. As you're talking now, my mind's going mad and opportunities and thinking what could happen. And I guess there's that link as well, isn't there, of school leavers, of understanding what subjects they excel in, let's say geography, history and maths, and knowing in the real world, what might those topics lead us to? I mean, what jobs out there will actually allow you to flex your geography, history, maths muscles? Think about when I left school, nobody pointed that out to me. If I liked a particular subject, what career did that actually lead me towards? So
absolutely. And I think there's a real lack of conversation around the fact that we don't necessarily need to have the exact fit for the role that we want to go into. I think when you leave and you've got qualifications, you think, oh, this has set me up for a certain role. And I think once upon a time that was the case. You had a very straightforward pathway into a role, whereas now you can see just through the way that people advertise on LinkedIn that actually if people have got certain experiences or they're willing to grow in a certain area, you don't necessarily need to have the perfect set of qualifications and the perfect set of skills in order to then go out into that role. You can show that you've got transferable skills and the will to and the drive to learn. And I think that's almost as important as whatever list you've got on your CV. And I think that's definitely a conversation that we need to be having more with young people. The GCSE results and A-level results or whatever are not the be all and end all.
Yeah, indeed. Listen, Dionne, we are done. Great conversation. Thank you so much for your insight. I've absolutely loved every second of it. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thanks for having me.
Cheers. And that's it, folks. I look forward to seeing you all next time for another edition of Rich Conversations. See you soon.